candidates have their 3 minutes to introduce themselves to you, and I guess we'll start alphabetically. How's that? Let's see. Jen.
Well, good morning, and thank you for being with us so early this morning. I am Jan Angel. I'm running for re-election, and the reason that I'm running is probably the reason I ran 12 years ago is that I want a better life for our people. So many of our folks have lost their job, they've had their hours cut, and we've got to get people working again. And the only way that we're going to do that is to make our local businesses and our employers stronger so they can provide the jobs, because that's the only means we have at this point to get us out of the hole that we're in right now. So jobs are critical. Next, I want to make sure that we have a budget that not only is balanced, but that is sustainable. Now, we're called to Olympia to do a balanced budget, and we leave with a balanced budget, but we come back with special session after special session. In 4 years, I've done 4 regular sessions, and I've done 6 special sessions because of budget issues. Have to have a sustainable budget, and I have a plan that will work to get us there. Next, education. Obviously, education is the paramount duty. It is the only thing that our Washington State Constitution mandates us to fund, and we need to do that. The McCleary decision has come down and said, thou shalt not cut education any further. Next, public safety. As an elected official, it's my job to keep you as safe as I can where you live and work. Under that, it's law enforcement, corrections, emergency management. We'll talk about that a little bit later on the funding issues of that. And then I believe that it is our moral responsibility to take care of those that truly cannot take care of themselves. And that's our disabled, our mentally ill, our seniors. Now, taking all of this, encapsulating it, it's very important that you lay out the priorities in your budget of what you're going to fund, and then fund them. And it's really as simple as that. Those are my top priorities, and I look forward to discussing more with you, your questions as we go on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And for your minutes.
Good morning. I'm Karin Ashabraner, and I feel like I need to give you a little bit of background about myself because so many of you don't know me. I'm a teacher. I've been with the Peninsula School District for 15 years or more. I teach 8th grade U.S. history, and I love every minute of it. But one of the things that I do the first day of school is I got to get to know my 150 new faces that I see before me every year. And so what I do is I hand them out a little card and I ask them for some information. Their name, their parents' names, phone numbers, their birthday, so I can recognize their special day as we go through the year. And I also ask them to give me a little bit of something about them. Not to tell me any deep, dark secrets, but just some little thing that, maybe their best friends know about them, but not everybody else. So this way I get to learn about my students, and then I give them back some of that same information. I tell them that I am a Husky. I graduated from the University of Washington, Tacoma. I have a master's degree from UPS. I'm a national board certified teacher, so that they know that I'm not just some regular old teacher. I'm somebody who has put myself through a rigorous process to be the best teacher that I can be for them. But then I give them that little tidbit, that little something that not everybody knows about me. I put up a picture on the overhead, and I can't do it justice here today, but I'll be happy to share it with you. But I put this picture up on the overhead in my classroom. This picture is of a young soldier in full battle rattle, helmet on, gas mask at their side, M16 in hand. And I tell them, that's your teacher. And I'm an expert shot with an M16. I don't tell them, of course, that I qualified after 4 or 5 days of training. I only qualified once, and my eyesight was a whole lot better then, 20 years ago, than it is now. But Be that as it may, I like to give them that little human bit about me. I have served for 22 years in the United States Army. Most of that was reserve service. I was sent to Saudi Arabia in support of Desert Storm. I understand what it means to be a veteran. My oldest daughter, as an Army officer, was twice sent to Iraq. I understand what it means to be a military family. Education is my top priority. I know that the state's paramount duty is to fully fund education. That's been upheld by the Supreme Court, and we need to make sure it happens. Secondly, I am concerned about veterans and their families. I want to make sure that those who have served for us get the service from us they deserve. And finally, I too want to make sure that our businesses and our families are on their feet.
Thank you, Karin. So with that, we're really fortunate this morning we get to actually ease into some of the questions. Last time we actually just jumped right off the cliff. So, so with that, we're going to start with you, Karin, since you ended. And the first question is, what are the obligations of a state representative to the constituents in the district? 1 minute.
I believe that the responsibilities of a state representative are to be knowledgeable, dependable, and attentive to the needs of the community. I believe that representatives need to be open and receptive to ideas. They need to be welcoming and therefore have town meetings, print material that comes and goes both directions, and have to be aware and on top of whatever's happening. Again, I believe attentive to the needs of the constituents is probably my #1 response.
Thank you. First of all, one of the most important things to me is when you send me an email, you get a response. We spent hours and hours and hours of reading emails and responding back to you. Another thing is I have a district office that is open 5 days a week where we have people coming in and telling us their story about what's going on in their life and what they're having to go through and asking for help to get through the red tape of government. So responsiveness and a committedness to listen, because I am there to represent each of my constituents. And in order to do that, you've got to listen and then respond with either action or whatever it takes to try to help that constituent. And I think we do a really good job with that. We get comments back all the time that, thank you for listening to me, or you're the only one that responded back to me. That's my job. And when it comes to issues, take an issue fairly, analyze it, and listen to what your citizens say.
Thank you. And staying with you then, Jan, the next follow-up question is, I am wondering if you can give an example of a situation where you've been able to successfully address a difficult problem in a fair and equitable manner, leaving both parties feeling heard.
The thing that pops into my mind is a situation where I had an amendment that I wanted to tap on to an educational, it was an educational amendment. I was trying to get a little bit more money for education, and I wanted to tap on that amendment to a bill that was already going through. My caucus said, Jan, it's not going to go anywhere. I asked, can I file the amendment anyway? And they said, well, sure, go ahead. Well, I did. I filed that amendment, and toward the end of session, they said, it looks like your amendment's going to stick. I knew I didn't have the votes to get that amendment through. So I went across the aisle to another legislator that we came in as freshmen together. I know that we both are very passionate about education. I asked her, if I withdraw my amendment, will you run it? You can get it through. And she said, yeah, I'll do that. So when the speaker called and he said, Representative, present your amendment, I said, Mr. Speaker, I withdraw my amendment. She stood up, offered my amendment. I stood up, seconded it. Everybody knew what was going on. We got it through. Bottom line is get it done.
Thank you. Karin, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, thank you. In addition to being a teacher for 15 years, part of that time, I spent 4 years as the local president of the Teachers Association in the Peninsula School District. During that time, the Peninsula School District saw budget cuts of $15 million over 4 years' time, and we had to work through that. Part of what we did during that time, in a collaborative sort of way, was to work to craft a teacher evaluation plan. The Peninsula School District's teacher evaluation plan is one of those that has been used as the model throughout the state of Washington in this whole education reform and making sure that teachers are properly and effectively trained. So I'm very proud of working toward that. In addition, when I came to office, we were close to a strike. When I left office, we had reached an agreement before school was out, so teachers and parents would know what happened in the following year.
Thank you. All right, so let's move on to we have a question here regarding education. It's more of a statement, but I guess if you could address it as well. We'll start with you, Karin. The question is, why is an assembly line one-size-fits-all school superior to schools fashioned to meet needs of individuals, which is referencing charter schools?
Oh, could you read that again, please?
Why is an assembly line one-size-fits-all school superior to schools fashioned to meet needs of individuals, such as charter schools? Would be my guess. So the assembly line, one-size-fits-all, is a reference I would interpret toward the public school system.
A one-size-fits-all approach is not the public school system at all, so that's why I was confused by the question. Our public schools teach all students with all abilities. I myself am a special education endorsed teacher, so I have had students in my 8th grade classroom who read perhaps at a 2nd grade level, in addition to those who read at a much higher level, not to mention some of the other disabilities they have. So our public schools are not a one-size-fits-all. Charter schools, on the other hand, are allowed to accept whatever they choose to accept as far as students go, meaning they do not necessarily have to take special education students or other students with special needs. And theirs is perhaps more of a one-size-fits-all approach. I do not believe in any way, in any form, in a one-size-fits-all, whatever kind of school system you put it into.
You know, maybe it's time we look at education in a different fashion. I was at an educational conference in San Francisco when I learned about, for example, the Khan Academy. This is a program that actually allows children to be taught at the level that they actually are. And for an instance, there was a little girl that was in 5th grade and she was doing physics. So we went up to her and we said, "Is that 5th grade math?" And the little girl giggled and she said, "No, I think it's 6th grade." When children are allowed to move ahead at the rate they are capable of, I think we will better meet a global economy. And as far as charter schools, if we put any tool that we can put in the toolbox to make available to the legislature to help them do education with an outcome that makes our kids the very best they can and they can be competitive. Right now, our test scores, we're not meeting that level. So we'll talk about that some more.
So we're going to move on to veterans, but before we do so, just a quick reminder, if you have one of these things that we talk into, the little black box, please turn it off or put it on buzz. If it goes off during the middle of the session, we ask that you make a voluntary $10 donation to the local charity. This week's charity being
American Red Cross.
American Red Cross. Okay? Not that we're going to track it down and make sure it happens. It's just a goodwill, honorable request. So the question to you, Jen, is our area is home to a lot of veterans and their families. Nearly a quarter of the voters are vets. What do you believe are their needs and how do you propose to help them?
What we've done in the past, I ran a bill this last session for our veterans that those that are coming home that are veterans after 9/11, because there's a lot of our folks that are coming home that are going to have to get back to work. Many of them have lost their businesses if they had small businesses. My bill was that they would have a priority registration to get back into college to help them retrain and to get back into life. On a personal level, I've worked with our local Chamber of Commerce in Port Orchard to where we set up a local veterans fund that if they couldn't pay an electric bill or if they couldn't have ends meet during that month, we would personally help them. But our veterans have given so much that we might be free. And I think we owe them the right to be able to come home and have preferential treatment as to job training, get them back into our local community colleges, that we can get them back into the workforce.
Thank you. All right.
As I mentioned, I am a veteran, and I know what it's like to wait for a veteran to return from a war zone. I know that we have made great strides in accepting our veterans and giving them the due that they deserve. Unlike some of my colleagues from my early days in the military, we have gone out of our way as a country to make sure that our veterans feel welcome when they return. We still have much to do in the area of mental health services, of making sure that our veterans get the assistance they need to assimilate back into society. As I mentioned, my daughter returned from a war zone, and although she returned with all her limbs and all of her faculties, not everyone does. And it concerns me that we still have a long way to go to make sure those veterans get the services they need.
Thank you. So let's move on to veterans and move into social services. First question is, how can we make our various state offices more efficient, such as DSHS, et cetera, et cetera? Art?
I believe we need to take and review regularly all of our state offices. I'm a teacher. I'm new to this. I'm not an experienced legislator, so I can't tell you, as Jan probably can, what has happened and what they do in the past. What I can say is that there are organizations in our state now that are very heavy in the bureaucratic side and not so heavy in the worker side. We need to make sure that agencies like the Ferry systems have a better balance so that more of the money that we're spending on ferry systems, on transportation, gets funneled to the areas where we need it, not in the people who are running their offices or sitting in an office. Again, a regular audit system would help some of those issues.
I believe the point is performance audits, which our state auditor does. He goes through the different areas, and recently he's gone through transportation, has made recommendations. He's gone through education, and he's made recommendations. For example, there is an 89-page report that has just come out from the auditor on a performance audit that he did on education. And he was saying that when we spend $12 to $13 billion annually, and we have only about 59 cents on a dollar that gets back to the classroom, he's made recommendations of what he feels should be done in that regard. But then the departments have to be held accountable to make sure that they go through, and when these audit performances are done, they pay attention to those, and I would hope that the governor would hold those directors accountable to make sure there's actions after that.
Thank you. So we have two more questions on social services. The next one is, cuts have been made to basic health and disability lifeline. Should these programs be restored, and how should they be funded?
Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, it comes back to what we talked about on budget earlier. You determine what the priorities are that you feel are best done by government and then need to be funded. You only have so many dollars to fund those priorities, and you have to live within the means that you do have. Now, when it comes, they asked about disability.
Basic health and disability lifeline.
Okay, we know there's a lot of people in need, but I see a lot of fraud in these areas. What I think needs to happen is wipe the slate clean and only put back on the people that truly qualify. And I think you would find find that you are saving money, you are funding these programs, and that you also then have room for additional people if need be. Disability Lifeline, we took some of the folks off of that because there's federal programs they can go on that the state doesn't need to fund all of them through the state.
Thank you. Laura?
As I mentioned, I spent several years as the president of the Local Teachers Association and bargained with the school district. And in bargaining situations, what always tends to happen is the hard stuff gets left to last. You always deal with the stuff that's easy, but it's the money and the details that you always leave to last. And unfortunately, we can no longer do that in the state budget. We need to deal with those issues that come first. Education is the paramount duty. We need to make sure that we fund it first. Basic Health and the Disability Lifeline are programs that support our most vulnerable citizens, and we need to make sure that those kinds of things are also taken care of first. They're not left to argue over the money when we get to the very end.
So now our audience actually is quite well read and quite traveled. They have actually looked at other states, and they wanted to ask you these questions such as, do you support drug testing for welfare recipients even though it costs Florida millions more than it saved? Should legislators be drug tested? For some reason there's if I may read it again, do you support drug testing for welfare recipients even though it costs Florida millions more than it saved? Second part of the question is, because we're not saying that legislators are welfare recipients, should legislators be drug tested?
No, I do not support drug testing of welfare recipients. I believe it's been found unconstitutional in at least 4 other states. It has cost Florida more money than it has purported to save, and I don't have any problem with testing legislators, but I don't know that that would serve any real purpose.
I ran a bill to actually do drug testing on entitlement programs. And the reason I did that is when you have funds and you only have so many funds available to feed children, and that's our TANF program, I want to make sure that we truly are feeding children and not feeding drug habits. Florida was a little bit different, and the reason they had a lawsuit was because they were tying that to employment as well as entitlement programs. I believe, and I had good results from both the Democrats and the Republicans, and what we've decided to do is, since this is a big issue to discuss, we would meet and work on this and then have a work session again, bringing that bill back. Now what you do with a program like that, when you have, we set up to where if you took the drug test and you passed it, you were reimbursed the cost of that test. And then if another family member could also apply, the goal is to feed the children.
All right, so let's travel from Florida over to Arizona. The abuse and fraud in DSHS is rampant. I believe that's a declamatory statement, perhaps recognizing Washington. So the question is, Arizona put in place a $5 copay for all Medicaid patients. It cut down the abuse of medical system by 50%. Why can't we do this? Could it provide funding for Disability Lifeline program and reduce abuse?
Representative Armstrong and I ran a bill to actually flatten DSHS and start all over. They put 5 or 6 agencies all together, and that's too difficult to run. I went to my local pharmacist and I talked with him. He's a 5th generation pharmacist. And I asked him, how is this working? And he said, Jan, if I could live off of the fraud that I see in just 1 year, I'd make a lot more money than I do right now. We know we have fraud and abuse, and what programs, what checks and balances do we have in here? One of the recommendations I had is maybe have a photo ID card that is issued to DSHS patients who are going to pick up prescriptions so you can prove it's you. Many of the folks that are coming in are picking up OxyContin, and then the real person that comes in to pick it up, their prescription's already gone. There's fraud, there's abuse. It's time to restructure and reform DSHS so it works for the people it's supposed to.
Thank you. Karin?
I think it's somewhat unfortunate that the question here references Arizona. I'm flying this afternoon to Arizona. My mother's having surgery in the morning, and she lives in Maricopa County. Maricopa County is the home to Sheriff Joe. Sheriff Joe Arpaio is the one who is out to get every citizen who might resemble somebody of Hispanic descent. He has put prisoners in pink underwear. He has reinstituted the chain gang, and you know, some of that has some merit. But I think it's unfortunate that we reference Arizona as perhaps the ideal that we should shoot for. Are there problems in DSHS? Yes, there are. And should we fix it? I believe so. I'm not sure that I would agree that we need to raise it completely and start over, but we do need to make some changes to DSHS.
Thank you. So since we're on the issue of transportation, let's talk about something that's very unique to Washington State and a very unique ongoing discussion. The question is, do you favor privatizing the state ferry system? If not, do you think the current fares are too high or too low, and what revenue source could bring fares down?
No, I am not in favor of privatization of the ferry system. Yes, the fares, I believe, are too high. I remember I've been around the area for a very long time, grew up in Port Townsend, so when we wanted to go to Seattle, it was a big deal. Of course, we had to pay the toll on the Hood Canal Bridge and then cross the ferries, but the ferry prices then are so much lower than they are today. I mentioned earlier trying to do something about the bureaucracy in the state ferry system. We have, as I said, 2 bureaucrats for every ferry line worker, and there's something wrong with that. How do we fund, or how do we get the prices down? Anytime I'm asked about funding sources, I'd like to say, you know, if there was an answer to that, if I had that answer, I could write a book and make a lot of money. But no other legislator has that magic pill, that magic button as well.
Thank you.
No, I don't believe that privatizing the ferry systems, that's how we got them to start with. It was a private organization. They couldn't make it. The state took it on. When I was a Kitsap County Commissioner, I sat on the Kitsap Transit Board, and as you recall, we had a walking ferry that went back and forth. We subsidized that a huge amount, and they ultimately couldn't make it. You have a lot more federal dollars available from transportation. You have more funds that can fund ferry systems. Right now, we're working in a partnership, and we've been working on this through interim. I sit on the Transportation Committee, and we're working with the BC ferries to see if we could form some kind of a partnership that we could have boats made or operations, or how could we do it better? They're struggling the same way we are. The cost of ferries, you know, if you look at the per capita of what we're bringing in from ridership in the way of revenue, ferries are doing really well. We gave $11 million to transit last year, bus transit in Seattle.
Thank you. So moving on from transportation to, of course, healthcare. So what are, well, this one's actually a double whammy because it actually addresses the pension system as well. So what are the current state's liabilities for pensions and health care? What reforms are needed? Oh, yeah. 1 minute.
Oh, boy. In 1 minute. The pension system, we have a huge unfunded liability. My feeling is when people have earned and accrued their pensions, you don't mess with them. And we haven't funded in the past, and it was before Jan's time, but we haven't funded the pension accounts. We felt that you could skip a payment so that you can balance a budget. You can't do that. You have to pay attention to the budget amounts, for pension that need to go in there, and that has to be planned for. We haven't done a good job with that. We don't have a vision for this state. I've tried to get a 6-year financial vision so you can lay out what are the areas that you have to work on. And pension is certainly one of them. Huge unfunded liability. And where did we now come up with the great big amount of money that needs to fill that gap? You can't pay it backwards.
We have to break this into 2 parts because we're healthcare. But let's stay with the same question. Karin, so what are the current state's liabilities for pensions and healthcare? What reforms are needed?
Speaking to pensions, as a teacher, when I became a teacher, I had the opportunity to choose which pension system to join, because at that time there were a couple of options. And of course, we were promised one thing by the state, gain sharing they called it, and then if you went with another plan, you got a certain percentage more. And none of those things have happened over the course of my years as a working teacher. The state has borrowed some money from this fund and used some money from that fund in order to meet its day-to-day operations. And that has caused a lot of angst on the part of a lot of people who are aiming for retirement at what is generally considered to be a normal retirement age. Many of my colleagues say they're going to have to work till they're 110 in order to get to the teacher's retirement age. We'll have to do the healthcare in another question.
All right, let me set the healthcare component aside. We got a few other questions to make, but hopefully we'll come back. Good. So next question has to do actually with residency. So Washington State is one of only 2 states that does not require proof of residency when obtaining a driver's license. Should applicants for driver's licenses need to show proof of U.S. residency before being issued a driver's license in Washington State?
I believe first and foremost that it is important to make sure that those people who are on the roads driving have the education and the ability to drive. If they happen to be an illegal alien or an illegal resident, that is not as important to me as making sure that everybody is safe. I would rather see that we are providing everybody the opportunity to get the training and the safety needs that they can get.
Absolutely. Some type of citizenship of the United States must be shown. I ran a bill year before last to do just that, and it ran through transportation. They pulled in so many people, making that an immigration issue, that our chair was actually afraid to bring the bill forward. That driver's license is used to show who you are, to get the entitlement benefits, and if you don't know if you're really in this country legally, people work really hard to be an American citizen when they come to this country. Both of my grandparents came from what they called the old country, but they did it right. They went through the immigration program and they became legal citizens. Yes, you should have some type of birth certificate, whatever, required to show that you are a U.S. citizen to have a U.S. state of Washington driver's license. We're one of the only states in the nation that doesn't do that now.
Thank you. So let's jump. We had education K-12 before, so this one actually sounds like it goes into higher ed. Student loan debt surpasses credit card debt in the United States. What would you do to reduce the cost of college, specifically tuition, for our next generation?
Yes, we have put more, we have, I think, $637 million more into K through 12, but we actually took money away from our higher education. And that's one of the things, you have to look at the whole system. We have early learning, and I've served 2 years on early learning. I've served 2 years now on education policy, and I've served 2 years on higher education. I was one of those middle-class families that had a heck of a time getting my daughters through college. My husband had passed away. I had 2 girls in college, If you're low income, you can get grants. If you're high income, you don't need to worry about it. We were that middle rung that had to go out and get the student loans and anything that we could, and then my girls had to pay student loans back for years. We've got to get a handle on the higher education because we're not getting, first of all, we're not getting kids through high school graduation at the rates we need to. So how are we going to get them to go to college when they're priced out of that system?
Thank you. All right.
I'm still paying for my college loans, and will be doing so for quite a while. I know how expensive it is to go to college. I too have two daughters who well, one of them paid her loans off only to go and get some more college education. One of the things that we have to do is we have to make sure that we, as I said earlier, quit gutting higher education. We need to make sure that our students in the state of Washington have the ability to go to college, because in this day and age and in the economy of the future, a high school diploma is not going to be the ticket out. Everyone who wants to be successful, who wants to be competitive in that global economic market is going to have a degree of some kind, whether it's trade or higher education in any form. And we need to make sure that the state doesn't keep cutting in and making that more difficult for our students.
Thank you. So moving on from higher education to municipalities. So how will you, assuming that you would want to do this, how will you prevent the legislature from passing unfunded mandates on our cities?
Unfunded mandates are something I'm familiar with as a teacher. Education has been the brunt of unfunded mandates for many years. I used to say that it wasn't just the school district that put the demands on the students and the teachers in class, but it was the state, and beyond that it was also the federal government as well. We have to make sure that if we're going to set some requirements, whether it's in education, whether it's for our municipalities, whether it's for any other entity, we have to make sure that there is a means and a method to fund that. We cannot keep asking more and more and more without making sure that we have the answers to back it up with the dollars. I am not suggesting that throwing money at some problem will fix it. That is not the answer. But unfunded mandates have got to stop.
Unfunded mandates are passing the buck from the state down to the counties and the cities. I remember how painful that was as a county commissioner. The unfunded mandates, we actually had buttons made that we wore to Olympia that said, fund it or forget it. And I still agree with that. If you cannot fund it, should you be requiring cities and counties to do that when there's no funding to go with it? Sitting as ranking member on local government, we actually ran a bill this last year trying to stop the unfunded mandates, and we couldn't get enough votes to even get it out of the House. So I think the thing is, we have to show our educators, those of us, or our legislators, those of us that have been in local government, what that does to our citizens, what that does to city and county government. You can't do it. Fund it or forget it.
All right, so now let's move on to the, let's get into some money issues of budget, shall we? So the first question is sort of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. So do you think our capital budget is too high, too low, or just right? And why? Jack.
Well, you have three budgets, first of all. You have the operations budget, you have a capital budget. The capital budget does infrastructure and projects, and the third budget is transportation. The question is on capital budget, which is on infrastructure and projects. The money that is allocated, the capital budget committee actually sits and hammers out what projects. There are a lot of projects from all over the state. And I believe that that's really important because our local jurisdictions, our cities, our counties, we don't have the funds to get a lot of those projects done. And that's what the capital budget is designed to do. I think it's very important, and I think you have to weigh what funds you have available there. And it's very, very important. However, money has, session before last, $777 million were swept out of this capital budget to balance the operating budget. That's not the way you balance budgets.
The question asks if the budget is too high, too low, or just right. And again, it's hard to know which budget you're talking about. Does the state spend too much money and not enough income? That may be the question. There has to be a balance between what we spend and what we take in. And I believe we need to take a look at our whole budget reform issues. We need to have those hard conversations about tax reform. We need to talk about how we're spending money, where we're spending money, because we cannot just simply say that the budget is too high, too low, or just right. There are too many factors, too many variables that are involved in that to make one just simple answer.
Thank you. So let's cut to the chase, shall we? Do you favor any form of a state income tax? All right.
In this day and age, I think it would be wrong for anybody to say that they favored a state income tax. I am in favor of taking a look at the tax structure. I think it's important for us to review some of those tax loopholes, some of those tax incentives that were instituted for a very good reason, may still have some benefit to certain aspects of our budget, but I think we need to take a look at all of those. We also need to take a look at the structure, where we're getting our money. When 10% of our citizens own 50% of the wealth in our state, there is something wrong with the balance of our economy. And I believe that we need to take a look at that.
No, I do not favor an income tax. When I was on the Kitsap County Commission, I was on the economic development part of the Puget Sound Regional Council. We started the conversation of tax reform. If we're going to consider any kind of a new or different type of tax, and I think we need to have that conversation, we need to sit down and look at the whole tax program, because you can't just keep adding on another tax without taking something off. Especially right now when we have businesses and people on their knees trying to keep the doors open, you don't go saddle them with more taxes. If anything, to keep our business community healthy, we should be looking at reducing the cost of business to them. The workers' comp cost, for example, for our business people ranks 50th in the nation. We're the 10th most expensive state to do business in. That's where we should be looking at. How do we get the economy back on track?
So staying with the economy issue, the question comes underneath minimum wage. And the question is, how would you address entry-level wages, service restaurant wages, or high school worker wages? Minimum wage. Jan?
I would have put a freeze on the minute we started to see. When I went into the legislature, we had a $9 billion deficit. At that point, I would have put a freeze on everything to analyze where you were at. I believe that a freeze needs to be put on the minimum wage, because as it's set right now, it continues to escalate, and it's really creating a problem for our restaurants. You could go out here and talk to the people that run this restaurant. When the bottom line keeps coming up, it has to push supervisors, managers, and everybody continually up. And the restaurants and the business people tell me that is a real problem for them. They can't continue to do that. Freeze the minimum wage. Let's take a look at that and see what, again, can we do to get the economy going back up. Continuing to push from the bottom up is hurting our business people, and we've got to address that, I think, immediately.
And I too believe that we need to take a look at how we allow wages to increase. I believe that everybody ought to be able to earn a family living wage. And one of the issues that we have has to do with businesses. Businesses get taxed and have to pay additional fees in order to be in business. And because of that, they can't pay some of the additional fees, the additional workers' comp payments that they have to pay in order to keep people working. We need to make sure that we get people back to work. In order to do that, we need to make sure that businesses get the support from the state that they deserve. They need to make sure that they can afford to pay people the wages that they deserve, and if that means that people are not getting as many hours, which tends to happen now, they're not getting the monies that they need in order to make sure their families are fed.
Thank you. So staying again on the issue of money, this one simply begins, show me the money. So where are the cuts coming in your plan? And also, what state agencies would you combine to save money and run more efficiently, assuming you would do so?
I don't know that I have a good answer for that question. I am new to this entire process, and I don't have any problem saying that I don't know something. I know that as in everything I've done in my life, when I get to a hard problem, I go to the people who can help me. I read, and I find out where the problems are, what suggestions have been made to fix it, what things have been tried in the past. I would go to those folks who have experience on either side of the aisle, on either side of the question, and I would read, I would listen, and I would learn so that I could provide a better answer, a better suggestion for where we could save money. Again, I'd love to write that book and make a bunch of money, but I don't have a one answer to that question.
It's not what you cut, it's what you have the money to fund. And you start by, first of all, analyzing, as I said, the priorities of what does government do best, what does private sector do best. Then you go down and you set performance audits and standards on the things you've agreed to fund. From that, you need to make sure that you have fiscal notes attached to a bill. You need to know what something costs before you vote on it. That doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen rarely, actually. Then when you go on further down, you must allow the governor of the state to take immediate action if they need to. Right now, they can't do that. They can do a cut across the board, that's it. They need that authority to act quickly if they must. And then you must make sure that you have a minimum of a 5% reserve. Because right now we have less than a 1% reserve. That runs government for 2 days. Heaven forbid, if we had the big earthquake tomorrow, 2 days to get our government back up and running, we couldn't do that. That's irresponsible.
Okay, so let's move on to job creation. And the question is, please discuss your experience in dealing with private sector business, the private sector business community. How will this experience help with job creation ideas?
Well, I've owned my own business, and I've owned more than one. When I was in Alaska, I was an owner of an insurance agency, and I had an insurance license. Here in Washington, I owned my own business. I had about 54 employees, 2 locations in Kitsap County, 2 in Pierce County. I've walked in the shoes, and I know how hard it is to make a payroll and to sign the front of that paycheck. But what we have to do to be able to get, again, we've got to have the reforms that are needed. And I walk my talk. I have a 100% voting record for small business, and I've received awards from the National Federation of Independent Business and from the Association of Washington Business for doing that. Get government off the back of small business and let them do what they do best, and that's retain jobs and create jobs.
I have mentioned before, and I will continue to mention, that this state's business and operation taxes on small businesses are crippling some of our very new and innovative businesses. And we need to make sure that things like that can stop or be changed, be lifted, be modified, so that we can get people back to work. If we have people who have some wonderful ideas and can expand those into businesses, putting people back to work, I think that's a marvelous idea, and we need to make sure that those things happen. We also need to take a look at the infrastructure in our state. We need to work on the roads. The roads in this state are in an abysmal state, and we need to work on roads, waterways, information highways in order to take us successfully into the future.
Thank you. Now we're actually getting down to the last two questions, if we can squeak them in. And the last question, which is, cutting to the chase, would you vote to uphold 2/3 majority? All right.
The 2/3 majority that was recently passed and upheld is currently being challenged in the court system. And the reason for that is if the state legislature decides to eliminate some of those tax loopholes and incentives that I've mentioned, does that constitute, in fact, an increase in taxes? And there is a court case that is pending on that. I think that because the state has the ability to ignore some of the initiatives that have been put before it, I think that there may be a time and a place to take a look at how that 2/3 majority will affect us. Bottom line, I do not believe in increasing taxes at this point, but I think it is something that we do have to consider for our future.
Thank you. Janet?
Back in 2007, when the state had a surplus, the people voted to put this 2/3 vote before you can raise taxes into effect. And the reason I believe they did that is they said, we have excess money right now. We don't want that to go away. 63%, I think, in this district actually voted and for the 2/3. That is my marching directions. That come from the people. But it comes back up every 2 years to be voted on, and it's going to be back up again. I do support that. I think it makes the legislators take a hard look at, is this what we really want to spend, and do we have to do that now? And if 2/3 of the majority of the House or the Senate then support that, then it's something that should be done.
All right, thank you. Given my pledge to you all to have you out of here by 8:30, as close to the time as possible, well, we actually are now coming to our concluding remarks. But first of all, I'd like to thank both our candidates for attending today and giving them their time and their meeting this civic duty challenge. So with that, we started with Jan. I would like to start with Karin for concluding remarks. You have 2 minutes to address our audience, please.
Again, thank you all for coming this morning. Thank you all for allowing me to be here and share some of my views. It is most difficult for a teacher to only be confined to 1 minute. I'm used to 15-minute periods, but that's okay. A couple of things I'd like to leave you with. Again, I'm a teacher. I know how important education is to all members of our society, from preschool years through higher education. We need to make sure that the state continues to fulfill its obligation in that regard. I'm a veteran, and I understand how veterans have served for us and how they will continue to serve and protect us. I have 2 daughters, one of whom I mentioned was a veteran herself. My other daughter and her husband are both in law enforcement fields, and I understand those issues as well. Thirdly, I am a believer in small business. I believe in the little guy, and I would like to encourage anyone with a new and innovative idea to be able to express that and get to work. We have too many people on the peninsula area who are struggling to make ends meet, too many families, too many small businesses, and we need to make sure that every elected official is working to create jobs or working to create a business economy that is thriving. we've touched on several issues here today that I would love to be able to expand on. Things like charter schools, which are very important to me, and I believe to you and your futures. We've talked a lot about some funding issues, and again, there is no magic answer to that, but I would love to have further discussions. Again, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Karin. Jan?
Yes, and thank you for coming as well. I wish we had more than 1 minute to tell you the stories. It would be really helpful, but we only have so much time today. I think the most important thing right now is we're facing some real critical times. And the key here is who has the experience to handle these times. I've worn a lot of hats in my lifetime. I've been in retail sales. I was a financial person for a large cable construction company where I was the liaison between management and IBEW labor unions. I've spent 14 years in banking to where I've done finance and loans and credits. I've owned my own business and walked in the shoes that those folks have and do. I've spent a number of years, 7 years, in real estate, learning property rights and land use issues. That's a huge deal right now. And now, 8 years as your county commissioner, where running the country, working with 17 unions, and taking all the boards that we sit on, from health to transit to emergency management, and now 4 years representing you as a state representative. It's gotten easier. I can walk across the aisle and say to someone, do you have a minute? And they'll say, sure, Jan, come on in. Whenever you can have the conversations with people, I believe you can come to good negotiations and you can come to good solutions. And that's what I want for our people, good solutions. It's a critical time. Experience matters. And I ask for your vote on August 7th. Send me back to Olympia. Let me continue to work for good solutions for you. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, congratulations and thank you very much for your leadership. Audience.